mean, one clear takeaway that I'll have from this conference is there's a lot of action around technologies that bridge unlicensed and licensed. I saw a number of examples this conference that I think seem very exciting. Is that a right takeaway, Dave? And if so, what are some of the sort of like policy principles that we should be thinking about? Not just around these particular technologies, but about technologies writ large that are going to be bridging licensed and unlicensed.
Sure. So I think that's a great observation. I think, I've only been here today, but I've heard a number of people up on the stage speaking about the walls being broken down between technologies, the convergence between technologies, the envy that LTE has for Wi-Fi and vice versa. And I was actually just in my mind going through this morning thinking about some of the capabilities that we've historically associated with LTE, which we're now seeing in Wi-Fi, Hotspot 2.0 for seamless authentication and roaming, OFDMA with 11AX. I had another one that slipped my mind. And then some of the things that we've historically associated with Wi-Fi that are now showing up in LTE. So the inherent sort of dense small cell deployment nature of Wi-Fi, the massively deployable nature of Wi-Fi, as Dan alluded to with OpenG. So I think, despite some of the perhaps business issues that exist, the technologies are coming together, and there's no doubt about that. We're talking about LTE being opened up using open spectrum to non-traditional operators to deploy, or even potentially private entities to deploy LTE services. I think this is all just the initial edge of a wave that's going to be going on in terms of freeing those traditional lines between technologies that fit nicely into a licensed category and more into an unlicensed category. I think we're going to all have to get used to the idea that these things are blurring a little bit, and we're going to need spectrum policy that accommodates that. We're extremely excited about what the FCC is doing in 3.5 with CBRS, where you've got obviously the incumbent users, you've got a licensed tier, which that doesn't have to be necessarily a mobile operator who would acquire those licenses, from the short-term licenses that are there, but you have this licensed tier, and then you have a general authorized tier. And I tell you, in that 150 megahertz of spectrum, you can accommodate an awful lot of different use cases. So I think that's the kind of policy direction that we're excited about.
Dr. Marcus, do you have any sort of thoughts on the policy principles that we might see that will allow these kind of bridging technologies or converged technologies to succeed in their deployments?
Let me agree with Commissioner Rosenworcel this morning. We need a balanced combination of both licensed and unlicensed. But I'm not familiar with Qualcomm's advocacy at FCC for the past decade, but I am familiar with the major cellular carriers' advocacy at FCC. And the major cellular carriers, case after case after case for over a decade, have opposed any single new hertz for unlicensed spectrum. The cellular carriers have used unlicensed spectrum to bail themselves out in numerous occasions by using Wi-Fi where they were running out of capacity. But every time for the past decade, when there was more unlicensed spectrum on the table, the cellular carriers said, no, 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 give it to us. We have a much better business model. Unlicensed is bad. And indeed, there was a bizarre hearing 2 years ago on a bill that was written by a congressional staffer who was a former CTA employee that would have essentially made it impossible to allocate any new, more unlicensed spectrum by requiring a bizarre unlicensed auction that no one could understand. No one ever spoke out in favor of it except the former CTIA staffer, but there were nagging doubts about why was he pushing it. So the cellular carriers, while they have used unlicensed spectrum, they're very interested in LTE-U, generally have opposed any new unlicensed spectrum, and that's always been bizarre to me. So I like Commissioner Rosenworcel's approach. Most people like that approach. It seems to be the commission approach. But the cellular carriers have been ambivalent at best, but generally hostile to the concept of any additional new unlicensed spectrum, be it TV white space or virtually any other band. They say, we're a better business model, we can use it better. And that's another thing that makes me concerned about LTE-U, that I'm willing to believe that Qualcomm is very well intentioned, but the carriers who would be the direct users of you don't install it, you don't decide it in the geometry where it's put. And I'm a little bit puzzled about what exactly the cellular carriers have in mind.
Well, if that point that Dr. Marcus made resonates with any of you, I'll just reiterate my invitation to engage through organizations like Wi-Fi Forward to make sure that the voice of the unlicensed community is heard in some of these important deliberations. Eduardo, did you have any comments you wanted to make about?
Oh yeah, so a couple, just a final thoughts on your question.
Yeah.
Also, actually, I want to first respond to Dr. Marcus. I think on the issue of whether operators would put their antennas high or whatever, I think the thing is, the deployment models have to follow the specifications of the band, and that required the maximum. There was a maximum transmit power level, which basically would force all these deployments in LTE-U or LTE to be small cells. So it doesn't really make sense to put a small cell up in a tower. You're going to get no coverage at all. So the deployment models for LTE-U and LTE are going to be exactly the same models as we deploy Wi-Fi access points. It's low transmit power levels. It's going to be indoors. It's going to be outdoors in kind of hotspot venues. So going back to the spectrum policy recommendations, I think we absolutely have been very strong advocates of licensed and unlicensed spectrum with the FCC. I mentioned earlier 5.9. 5.9 proposal to extend the band and basically be able to coexist with the SRC band. It was actually a proposal that Qualcomm and some other companies put forward about 3 years ago, and we're glad to see the FCC is revisiting that. We also have a proposal to extend the 60 gigahertz, almost double it, to basically enable higher data rates in the evolution of 11AD. But also at the same time, we continue to advocate for more licensed bands because we feel like it's needed for the cellular system, and particularly lower frequency bands that need to be allocated because those are more relevant for cellular systems. So from a recommendation point of view, I think kind of looking at that would be interesting. Also, obviously going towards 5G now, we have millimeter wave and different spectrum being considered, spectrum bands being considered, and also there'll be like different combinations of licensed and non-licensed there as well. I think being technology neutral, as FCC has been, is the important aspect, and basically letting the industry and the market